This is the Thursday, January 15th, 2026. The whole meeting of the Glencoe Village Board. Call the meeting to order. Let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hall here. Trustee Mealopoulos. Trustee Underdog here. Trustee Rosenblatt here. Trustee Rubin here. Trustee Scott. Yeah. President Rowan
Here. We are not live streaming this meeting, right? But the video recording should be available on the village channel. Pursuant to the village board's comment rules, because the village board regular meeting is scheduled tonight. Non-agenda items will occur only during the regular village board meeting, which begins at 7 o'clock. If you have a comment on an agenda item that's included in tonight's committee, the whole agenda, I'll ask those comments provided when you reach that item on the agenda. At the appropriate time, all comments related to agenda items are limited to 3 minutes. I'll notify the speakers when their time is up. The first item on the agenda is continued discussion of the Glencoe streetscape and parking study. I'll ask our Public Works Director, Monica Sarna, our Development Survey Director, Taylor Baxter, our both contested Joey Mariano, Michael Blue, present tonight. Should be starting. Monica is
I will start.
Taylor, and meeting's closer.
We go to the. There we go. So we are here tonight to continue our discussion of the parking streetscape study. We last talked about this in the summer, at which point the board directed staff to go back out for another round of public comments, public feedback. We sent out a second public opinion survey. We got a really good response, over 500 responses to this, which is really excellent, which has given us a lot of new information. What we're trying to do right now is work towards preparing a final draft of this study to bring back to the board for consideration and hopefully adoption later this spring. As we work towards that, we're looking for some guidance coming out of the second public survey results. We're going to go through those tonight. We have Jody Mariano from Tesca who's going to present some of what we've taken away from that survey and some options going forward. I think that you'll see that coming out of that survey, there's some of the feedback is there's some tension between what respondents want. For example, a lot of people want additional parking, or at least to preserve the parking we have. At the same time, a lot of people calling for expanded sidewalks, improved pedestrian facilities. Some tension between that. Can't do everything all the time. There's a call for the most popular of the Vernon Avenue concepts was the most radical change. At the same time, we heard a lot of people saying, have a light touch, you don't change too much. There's some tension there too. So what we're really looking forward from the board is some continued direction on what your priorities are as far as the goals of this study going forward to help us really craft more effective, more targeted strategies in the final draft of this study. After Jody's presentation, we're going to be talking about some more specific feedback. We have some recommendations for some near-term projects, really for the 2027 fiscal year, most likely. Some feedback on potential parking management strategies, managing the parking that's already available downtown. Some targeted new parking options. We don't really have any really large-scale new parking options in this study at this point. We're not proposing a new parking garage or anything like that at this point, but we do have some ideas for some targeted, smaller parking locations where limited amounts of new parking could potentially be added throughout downtown. And then in the longer term, talking through some of the potential streetscape improvements, which are larger investments, which are going to need more discussion and likely are not 2027 projects. So open to your feedback about what should and shouldn't be included in the final study. With that, I'll turn it over to Jody.
Great.
And then we'll take it from there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Taylor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jody Mariano with Tesca Associates. With me is Michael Blue, my partner in crime here. Thank you for having us this evening. Just like Taylor mentioned, we're going to talk through some streetscape feedback that we got and how we're considering applying those to the draft plan that you will then see in a couple of months. I'll go through the presentation just like Taylor said, and then after that, I think there's going to be a Q&A with feedback from you all. Just to recap where we've come from, we started back in October of 2024 with our parking analysis. Since that time, we've had 2 community surveys, we've had 1 public open house meeting, we've had resident focus group meetings, business focus group meetings. We've been before the Plan Commission a couple of times, so we've taken a lot of feedback. And I will just say before I get into it, there is a lot of things that we would consider to be the common denominator, a lot of things that most everybody agrees on, and there's some things, just like Taylor mentioned, that maybe warrant more discussion. So I'll go through those too. Just a refresher, the purpose of the study is to look at parking, both usage and management, but also to improve the comfort and safety for pedestrians in downtown. And then lastly, we call this like the icing on the cake, amenities, trees, seating, dining, all of those things. But those things like benches and plantings really only work if the room around it supports it well. So that's why we have to think about all of these things together. We've had public feedback, we've been developing concept plans and costs, and then the outcomes of this will be a plan that will be used to guide future discussions and planning for investment. It will have plans and it will have conceptual costs to support that. So what we learned from the parking assessment that happened in the fall of last year is that, and there is a much more robust report, but the key takeaways is that the overall supply is considered sufficient. We're at 85% peak use. The parking supply issues that were observed at certain times had different types of uses at certain locations. So the supply didn't always meet what was needed. And then the study does evaluate strategies for improved management of the existing parking and improvements for opportunities for new parking supply. So we're looking at management and we're also looking at supply. So we'll talk about both those things. This is a high-level summary of what is in your packet in terms of the enhancements near-term and long-term that we're asking for feedback from the board on. So I won't read them all, but first one is about improving connectivity to parking east of Green Bay Road. We've got lots of great supply there that not everybody is using, and also better connections to get there. Managing our existing parking better, providing additional supply. We found some places where we can be more efficient to add more parking on street. And then improving our right-of-way encroachment policies and processes to basically clean up the sidewalks to make them look cluttered. It's something we heard a lot about. And then long-term infrastructure enhancements, options for Vernon Avenue. What we had heard early on by lots of folks in all of the outreach was to consider a special place in downtown that could be a draw, a major destination, and that could be Vernon Avenue. So those studies we'll talk about as well. So we've kind of organized our strategies for the streetscape and parking study based on what we heard in the surveys and also kind of these 6 points. So number 1, increase parking supply and improve the management. We really want to make sure that people feel like there is available parking, both the way that it's managed and the way that it's physically out there in the streetscape. Calming traffic and improving safety and connectivity for pedestrians. We want to make sure that people feel really comfortable walking in and around the downtown, and especially getting to the east side of Green Bay Road, where we have this wonderful trail and lots of parking. Creating wider sidewalks and gathering places. There's different ways to create wider sidewalks. We could physically move the curb over, or we can declutter the sidewalk space with the way that we manage outdoor dining and seating areas. Creating a unique destination along Vernon Avenue. That was that idea to make a special place for outdoor seating and dining, a destination. At the same time, as Taylor mentioned, there was a lot of comment about prioritizing simplicity over large infrastructure improvements. There's a lot that can be done without having to move curbs around. So 4 and 5 does have tension between them for sure. And then the icing on the cake, trees, greening, paving, and furnishings. Once we have sort of the room set up and the space that we know we have to work with, those things most certainly can be added. And we spent time talking with the community about what types of features exist in downtown that want to stay. So for instance, these paving, raised planters, things like that, and then what could be added on and new. So there is not a desire by any means to throw it all away and start over, but to work with what we have. Okay, so as far as increasing parking supply and improving management, I should have mentioned Tesca is supported by TY Lynn engineers who have been assisting us with the engineering portion of this and also the parking. So I will do my best to channel my inner engineer, but first one, increase parking turnover. So enforcement is always key. And then there have been discussions about maybe considering targeted and flexible paid parking. We know that everybody really wants to park in the 100% block of Vernon and Park. And that's also the place where we have the highest amount of pedestrian activity, the most outdoor seating and dining. So something does have to give. So that's something that had been discussed. Second, improving marketing and outreach. So branding and renaming the parking lots. We already have parking signs identified, but there have been some calls to maybe give them names, give them some way for people to really know where they are and to link better. Creating interactive parking maps, something that could be digital, for instance, and then, of course, working with employees to make sure that they're not parking in the prime parking spots. Enhancing and branding the parking signage, just like I mentioned, they could be enhanced with branded names and improve the messaging. We did work on the signage, and there is a lot of information which had been pared down from a lot more information that wanted to be on those signs, but that's something that we had heard. Promoting alternative modes and welcoming bikes, so increasing bike parking, which we already have lots of great bike parking downtown, but can always add more. Improving the trail access. I think this connection along Park to the trail is key, and also there have been great improvements made to connections from Hazel, so just continuing to pull that east-west connection. And then messaging the bike walk distances is a very simple thing that can be done to say it's only 2-minute walk to get to the trail. Green Bay Road always does feel like such a barrier, but once you cross, you're there. So increasing remote parking use. Other communities have used valet systems, and so that's something that could be considered maybe just during peak times. And then exploring shared parking is something that other communities have done in partnership with their businesses. And then reallocate and expand the parking supply. So the underutilized spaces, primarily at the south part of town, and other parts could be reallocated for different types of uses. And relocating the reserved spaces can be considered. And then lastly, those spaces where we can convert existing parkway to new on-street parking is something that I wanted to talk about next. Oops. Okay, so this is an existing parking supply map, and I don't expect everybody to read all this, but everything in red is on-street parking. Everything in blue is a village parking lot. So the street parking that we have to work with today is 412 spaces. The parking lots are 618 spaces. So in total, we have 1,030 spaces within this study area, this blue dash boundary. We did a cursory look into some places where there is no on-street spaces, So for instance, in front of Friends Park on Vernon, we have a very wide parkway, no parking. We have other small areas, such as the space in front of the bank and across from Village Court, areas that are here along the side yards, south of Vernon, on Hazel and Park. These are all little places where we can maybe tuck in a couple more spaces. So when we do those at all of the yellow circled areas was our study, we added 68. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to do all of these. And I think that, given what we know now about the library expansion, probably doesn't make sense to do these 11 here. But we do know that there's space to add parking within our downtown, which not every community has. So it's something worth considering, even if only in part. Okay, the next strategy is about calming traffic, improving safety and connectivity. And these slides are set up so that the near-term opportunities are at the top and the long-term opportunities are at the bottom. So in the near term, some things that can be done would be enhancing intersection pavements with paint, either the crosswalks and or the intersection centers. The long-term version of that, if we find that that does a good job in slowing traffic and helping pedestrian connectivity, lots of communities have created these raised intersections where the elevation of the street at the intersection comes up to the elevation of the sidewalk. You start that ramping up before you get to the intersection so that the car slowly rises up, and it really does cause them to slow down and prioritize that pedestrian crossing. Those have been really successful. Also, adding traffic barriers and branded barrier covers. We know Jersey barrier walls don't look so nice, but other communities have done things with covers to make it look nice. That can be done to help create a sense of safety on the sidewalk, especially at dining. You can ask something.
Sorry, just a quick question
Yeah,
on the
please.
raised intersection. You just said it comes up to the level of curb. Does the curb go up as well so that you maintain a safety curb?
No, so the elevation of the sidewalk is the same elevation as the street at that point. And there's other safety perimeter features that we would use around the perimeter of where the curb would be. It would be a flush curb.
Okay.
Yeah, but it would be things like bollards, planter pots, so you have that definition. Thank you for asking that. Long-term, improving the east-west connections east of Green Bay Road through Park Avenue and Village Court. So this, of course, is our median that's over there at the across from Tudor Court, but the same idea could occur on the south side of Park on Green Bay Road. Since the village controls Green Bay Road, we have that great opportunity to do that and promote more of that connectivity. Enhancing parking signs and branded messaging we talked about is another near-term thing. Long-term, improving our north-south connections along Village Court. We have that great walkway that comes through the drive-through, but that could continue on and really enhance this whole street and this connection to Writers Theater. So this is a map that kind of looks at all of the roadway connections. I'm not going to go through all of it, but we can always get back to it. In general, I would just say here is Green Bay Road. Everything to the west of Green Bay Road, Park, and Hazel is to enhance what we have, not change the curves, keep it very simple, but improve the intersections, improve the crosswalks, and then improve the sidewalks within the curb space that we have. Once we get onto the east side of Green Bay Road, this is where we found opportunities to skinny up the street on Park and create a wider protected landscaped multi-use path. So the multi-use path that's coming along Green Bay Road would continue across Green Bay Road here to get to Park. So we'd have a good connection to that pathway. The parts of this map that I do want to highlight is a couple of additional connections that we think are really important that we can make. So Village Court, I started to talk about that with this connection, the pink one here from Village Court across to Tudor Court. This can be enhanced. And then in the future, if and when site gets developed here, another opportunity to extend that. So we have this additional kind of north-south connection, which will really help disperse and provide more opportunities for people to make those movements. The other one to talk about is this purple one. So this is approximately the location where the mid-block crossing would occur, landscaped median in the middle of Green Bay Road, just like we have to the north. So this would give us access. If you were a pedestrian and you parked your car in the parking lot here, you can get out, cross through the median, and then come across Wyman right out here. We know that the library is considering an expansion, and so there would be some coordination with that. From that point, as we're going to the Village Court parking lot, create a wider central walkway that then connects to Vernon. So this connection can be enhanced and reinforced. So speaking of that Village Court parking lot today, this center walk, well, just to orient you, library, Village Hall, Wyman Green, here's the lot. This walkway in the center is about 5 feet. It's really narrow, especially when cars are in there. The cars overhang. It's not a really comfortable walk. It is a pretty wide travel lane in each side. I think we're at like 24 feet. We could shave that down a little bit, go down to 22, restripe it, and give us a wide sidewalk in the middle. So really creating a better corridor. We've also studied other parking configurations, but none that keep the same amount of parking. I think this loses just 2 spaces in order to accommodate this. Okay, establish wider sidewalks and gathering spaces. So near-term ones, like I said, we can make sidewalks feel wider just in the way that we place furnishings on the sidewalk and hem them in a little bit better. So Things that other communities have done are, branded barriers. They can have plantings, they can have signage, they can, present a really nice space. But also make sure that we always provide at least 5-6 feet of clear walking zone on the sidewalk. We heard a lot of comments in the outreach that people felt the sidewalks were cluttered. They felt like they were tripping over things. So we want to make sure that we provide that clear walking zone. If we find that those work really well, we could always consider other kind of more robust infrastructure things. Another thing that can be done is the parklets that are done in the middle of parking spaces. If we wanted to test taking away some parking to add some parklets and maybe elongate them so they cover multiple storefronts, even if they're just serving one business, that's something that other communities have done successfully. In Wyman Green, there's already great events happening there. I think this was a yoga photo from another event, but continuing to test the types of events and activities that happen in Wyman Green, and then seeing what works and then using that to inform a potential long-term. In the comp plan, there was a concept that looked at improvements to Wyman Green that included things like raised terrace seating so that if you're up against Green Bay Road, you have a little bit of buffering from traffic. We tested some of these concepts in the outreach, and this was one of the most highly voted on improvements for Wyman Green. Other things long-term, if there was a desire, if these things worked out really well, maybe those things could get replaced with a plaza for additional outdoor seating and dining. This is a project in Wheaton. We were not part of this, but it did replace 7 parking spaces with a plaza type space that's been really well received. And then intersection bump out plazas is something that happens at intersections, and again, provides shorter distances for pedestrians to cross, but also wider spaces for sidewalks and seating and dining. Okay, so everything that I just mentioned so far were the things that pretty much everybody agreed on in all of the outreach. So those were what we would call the lowest common denominators. The idea to create a unique destination along Vernon Avenue was something that we heard a lot about, but not everybody was as supportive of this as the other things. Vernon Avenue already is a lovely space. We've got amazing buildings, great storefront architecture, a great sense of space in the street, but we don't fully provide the type of sidewalk space that people were looking for. It is cluttered, it is kind of narrow. So we studied 3 different concepts just for Vernon Avenue that looked at what we call the min, the mid, the max. The min has the least amount of change, so we keep our 2 lanes of traffic and our diagonal spaces on both sides. Basically just improve the bump outs. The mid takes our diagonal spaces and it converts one side of the street from diagonal to parallel. And what that does is it makes wider sidewalks, but it reduces parking. And then the max keeps diagonal on both sides, but then creates a one-way traffic pattern. So both the mid and the max, and I've got a diagram that kind of puts these in section here. Both the mid and the max, with the changes in parking and travel lanes, always get us either a 17 or an 18-foot wide sidewalk. So for reference, we have a 12-foot sidewalk out there today. It's just barely enough for a 2-top and people to walk safely through. If we had an 18-foot sidewalk, now we have an opportunity, for instance, for a 4-top table set, a 6-foot clear zone, and a raised planter that gives us separation from the street. So it's just a much more comfortable type of an outdoor dining environment. As Taylor mentioned, we got mixed results when we went to the public, both at the public meeting and at the survey number 2. And so these boxes in yellow highlight who voted for what. So the mid concept got the lowest number of votes. The min and the max were kind of similar, hovering around that 40% mark. So this is something that I think we're looking to solve tonight. I will say too, in order to accomplish the max concept, since it would require changing our travel lanes, it would warrant a traffic study. We also took a very high level look at what it would cost just to build Vernon Avenue based on typical streetscape costs per linear foot that we're seeing in the area. So the mid and the max concepts would be in the range of $2 to $3 million. The the min kind of concept would be in the range of 1 to 2. So just some other food for thought. I think that's my last slide, and I think at this point I'm going to turn it back over to staff. Thank you, Jody. All right, so what we're going to do now is kind of jump into some of these near-term and long-term enhancements and come up with some points of discussion. So the first one we want to talk about is improved connectivity to parking east of Green Bay. Jody touched on this a lot. It's creating all that parking that we currently have, not expanding any of the parking, but making it more accessible and comfortable for uptown patrons. So all right, what we're looking at here is 3 main routes of kind of creating that draw from east of Green Bay into the central business district. The first one is along Park Avenue, and then we have the one through Wyman Green and Village Court. And Hazel Avenue, like Jody said, has seen some recent improvements, although I think it may be underutilized, so there might be some light touches to really advertise that and draw people in more to using that as an appropriate means to connecting in through the area. So for this concept, I guess any questions, comments, thoughts, or concerns of this approach? This is something we could begin looking at in this year's budget as far as furthering these thoughts and continuing forward.
So we should be doing this. This is a min in terms of we're not gonna cause people's heads to explode. So, and it seems like an easy first step, which is a little bit more parking and making it easier and softer for people to get from where they're parked to where they want to be up to. So I think I'm totally on board. And my guess is the residents would be, all of them would be okay with that, subject to if someone's in front of somebody's house, of course, they're doing that.
We see some practical opportunities with particularly the improvement of the intersection at Park and Green Bay. There is a visual barrier that can exist from the standpoint of Green Bay Road itself, but also if you are on the west side of Green Bay crossing to the east side, it doesn't really receive you very well. There isn't a lot of waiting space. The crosswalks themselves are inconsistent. And those are all things that we can fix relatively easily and relatively inexpensively. And so that is really something that we see as an easy first. You want to talk a little bit about another crossing over here possibly too?
Yeah, and I did want to talk maybe about, it's looking at this as a near-term solution. I think it's moving forward with some of the next steps, and some of them may come sooner than others. It's not like we can do all 3 of these in the very short term. I would say Park Avenue is a priority, the Park Avenue and Green Bay intersection, and looking at making enhancements there. But the Park Avenue concepts east of Green Bay Road, I mean, those may be a more significant design development and construction development that will have to, it won't be happening in the next year. It will take some time to develop those plans, get them permitted. There may be some railroad coordination, which always speeds things up before we can move on to construction. As far as the mid-block crossing, along Green Bay Road, like Jody said, we do have control over Green Bay Road. That may be something that we incorporate into the resurfacing of Green Bay Road, where we add that median in there. Not to say that we can't add a mid-block crossing prior to that, but it may be kind of a stage. We're going to work components of these designs into our CIP projects as we're moving through. So, we could create a better walkway through Village Court in the shorter term, whereas the median within Green Bay may be timed up with one of our CIP projects for resurfacing Green Bay Road.
So that'd be a crosswalk with that little commuter lot that we use now. How many spaces are there?
There are 33 in that parking.
It's a lot. Okay, and then like another lot would be the Hazel one, the lot south.
Yeah,
Good lot.
so I talk about Hazel a little bit.
Yeah, so the southeast commuter lot, the south end of it, through the Green Bay Trail expansion or Green Bay Trail crossing improvement, we do have stairs that come down to Hazel Avenue. I think it's just one of those not well-known uses, and so that could be a short-term messaging. Hey, there's parking down here. You just have to walk down the stairs, quick, easy access into downtown.
So is there parking? Is there parking there? I mean, it's a commuter lot, so.
Depends on the time of day and day of week, but yes, there is, yeah.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at lunchtime, not as much, but typically any other time there's parking in that south end of the southeast commuter lot. And so that is capacity that's not being used that could be used better.
Back in the day when I used to commute, I always parked in the little 33 space lot that was a commuter. And now that's not a commuter lot. It seems like it's mostly not filled. So
It's not well filled.
and so it would be so you don't need, if you're going uptown, you don't need the bigger southeast lot, which is commuter lot, because there's usually spaces in the little lot. But it would be really worthwhile to make something across Green Bay Road not seem like such a barrier.
I think when we talk about Hazel, we're not talking about much. Actually, that's super low hanging fruit. That is an enhanced signage, awareness building, some lighting under the underpass. I mean, I think it's those kinds of things that just make it, again, less visually disruptive and more welcoming to that traffic pattern. And recognizing that this isn't just for our residents, this is for people who are coming to the community for any number of reasons, that if we can enhance just the way it feels to drive or walk through, by enhancing the signage, by improving the lighting, doing these kinds of improvements at the crossings, particularly, it just adds a clearer path, actually 4 paths across Green Bay, leading you into the central business district, where really 2 exists today. So that's where we see this as really kind of an opportunity to tap into what we already have with a relatively modest investment.
I just wanted to add a couple ideas. Well, I think all of this is great. Thumbs up, great. I wanted to recommend, so maybe for the mid-block crossing the library, we say we'll do it later. Maybe we just wait and see what the library's doing and kind of make sure we're in. So it's one recommendation. On the other 2 intersections, we'll hang fruit except for the park one. I know that there are funding opportunities and grants out there for like bike and pet accommodations. I know the park district received one for the Connect Glencoe and all that. So I would like to maybe see us try to look out for these so we can try to fund, especially the one at Park with the bike. I think would be pretty eligible for some funding. And then also, I like the idea of naming the parking lots and maybe like creating like a story map. I know our GIS consultant, they can create really nice stories and maps and things like that on our website, but I think that might be kind of cool and easy. Not east, west, north. I don't know. Let's figure
That it came up in the business focus groups quite a bit because we refer to them, the Southwest commuter parking lot. Like, what is that? Southwest of what? And that was, and I think even if it's the blue lot or those kinds of things, just to ease, that was a suggestion actually from Hometown, because they have events at Uptown and they're saying this is where you should park, and so they're trying to direct the folks who are coming to these events on where available parking is, and they say, well, it's just on the other side of Green Bay Road, because they can't really explain what the lots are. So that's another very low hanging fruit opportunity.
Let me say, I'm fine with coming up with names. I would note that historically, Glencoe has used really exciting names. For example, our schools, when I went here, south.
Right, right.
So,
Well, and don't forget, most of the parks still have number and letter designations.
Yes.
So we have like a website, maybe for some story maps, and then maybe we're driving around, obviously you don't have to use the phone, but you can see nice, really clean looking maps. It's a QR code, you can see.
Anything else before we move on to the next topic?
What I wanted to make sure that in the center area that we coordinate with the library,
Oh, yeah.
because they're gonna be doing construction. They hope they will be doing construction in that area. We don't want to spend a lot of money and you have to tear it out while they're working on the library.
Yeah, I think that would, if there were any improvements to the Wyman corridor, those are all coming as a function of or post library construction, because there's no sense in us trying to superimpose something into a process. And they, the library's architects have started to look at how to engage Wyman Green differently. I would see that as a collaborative effort. If that project moves forward, we would talk to them about how we'd all like to see Wyman function differently.
This may be a step back, but many of you know that at one time I served as the village parking adjudicator.
You should get. The job's still available.
And I resigned. But it was amazing to me and continues to this day about how many of the, for instance, shop workers are parking in the downtown. I took a Watson to be repaired recently, and the two ladies who talked to me pointed to me where their cars were in front of the building. And I'm thinking, that's not very customer friendly.
It's a continuing and ongoing problem in the public safety department.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. And it's certainly a pain from an administrator.
Well, and we have had, this is an Adams in the midst of rethinking our business licensing process. And historically, the business parking contingent is over there on in the Temple Court lot, and then west on Park Avenue and Grove. And if we stapled it to their foreheads, we couldn't be more emphatic about where those free parking spaces are. And we say that too, because in neighboring communities, business parking is not free. There are fees associated with it. Winnetka has fees, Northbrook has fees. And still, we struggle to get kind of that recognition of those spaces are not for you. Those spaces are. And there's any number of excuses as to why or why not. And so that is an ongoing struggle. Public safety's made a lot of inroads with it, particularly with our new parking enforcement system that we've had in place. But yeah, that is one of those things when we get the complaints about parking from some of the businesses, that is frequently a first question. Are you sure you know where all your employees are parked?
And visitors.
Yeah, I'm fine with the visitors. It's more if your employees are all parked in front of your storefront, don't complain to us that there's no parking available, because we've designated parking for those vehicles that are going to be here for a large portion of the day. These other these spaces really are for patrons and customers.
Okay, so let's talk about finding a way to, and I can remember this from 40 years ago, so I get that it's not simple. Let's talk about a way to enforce this, which maybe includes having the business pick up the tab if we have fines for employees, because and that they can encourage their employees.
Some are better than.
Well, I totally get that, but if they have to pay for it, they'll
pay attention.
Well,
And that may be a practical question that we talk about as a function of some of our parking rule making that will come as a outgrowth of this discussion as to whether or not we say you're going to have designated spaces we're gonna ask for some measure of payment for those designated spaces. And there is a heightened fine if you're outside of those designated spaces, or if there's no fee structure, there's still a heightened fine.
Yeah.
You know, we can, we have the benefit of differentiating those
It's, you
in a
know,
home rule environment. So
you know, in theory, we could be asking, employers to tell us what are the, like, the
They do.
license plate numbers.
they are required to do that.
And, you know, now we can actually, you know, we know who's parking where. So anyway. So the punchline is, okay, our parking's really okay, but we all know our fails want to go uptown someplace else, and oh my God, the parking is terrible. So we know, despite what we claim, that people think it's bad, and so we should take the low hanging fruit. And you've identified some, and in addition to the sort of structural things, getting across the road, yeah, let's put we like our businesses, but their employees can walk a little bit further. They just can't. And if there's somebody who can't, they can come to us and explain why they can't.
I mean, I don't think enforcement's a bad thing. The next day after we moved in, I had no idea there was the overnight parking. They were all parking up. I got a ticket. It was not a big deal. You'll learn. You don't want to pay that ticket again. You don't want it to double. I mean, it's not a big deal. Right. You know.
We write them, don't worry. I know, because there are people who don't like them very much, who happen to show up.
After 10 years in Glencoe, you would have been storming into the building.
Don't forget, outrage. Don't forget, this year, starting January 1st, those parking fines doubled from $25 to $50. That increase was the first major increase in several decades. So, you know, that's starting to sink in too, that there is if you're parked where you're not supposed to be parked, it's a bigger bite than it once was. So that's just an aspect of it.
All right, so we're gonna keep going through these. The next one I want to talk about is management of existing parking. And I think we've already kind of dove into that area. So a lot of these, like we were saying, enhanced signage, better marketing and outreach, maybe naming our parking lots. These are low-hanging fruit that we can move forward with. But there were two that are a bit more contentious. I'm gonna give it to Taylor to kind of talk through what those are. Yeah.
The first one, increased parking turnover. This is tied to the discussion of potentially exploring, I would call it targeted and flexible paid parking. And I'd preface this by saying this has not received much support in any place we've taken it, which is not surprising when you tell people want to consider paid parking where it's currently free. But what we're looking for today is, as we develop this final plan, and some guidance from the board about whether it should remain an item for future consideration. And I just want to try and explain why it's not been crossed off the list completely to this point. With turnover, we're kind of being pulled in different directions in terms of people who are asking for more short-term parking to increase turnover, and also people asking for more longer-term parking. For example, hair salons asking for 3-4 hour parking, more expanded, dramatically expanded hours from what's currently available. What more modern technology, not dropping a coin into a box and just paying by the hour the same price at all times. The more recent apps are very flexible with a target of making sure that there is available parking in specific locations, typically one spot per block at all times. The price will go up and down dynamically to make sure there's vacancy. So what this would do, if one of the goals of this study is to try and make it so that people can much more conveniently park in the core of downtown at peak hours, likely the best way to address that would be some form of flexible paid parking. If that's not one of the core goals of this, it's something that we could cross off. If one of the goals is more of, we have, our parking study shows 15% of available parking overall in downtown. We want to make it easier for people to get to that parking where it is now. This might not make as much sense. But if we do want to make it so people can park at Park and Vernon or the Village Hall parking lot at 1 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, this might be something that's worth considering, with the acknowledgement it has not received very much public support. So I think it really is dependent on what your goals are. Acknowledging it's probably a political lift, public relations lift to do it. But this is a way, if someone's looking for 15-minute parking, they pay for 15 minutes. If someone's looking for 4 hours of parking, they pay for 4 hours. If it's at a time of day or in a location where parking is not at a high demand, it might pay $0. It might be free. If it's 7 p.m., it might be free. If it's on Monday morning, it might be free. If it's on a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday afternoon, that price can go up in certain places while remaining low in other places. What we're looking for today is that something in this study that should remain an item for consideration, not something we're committing to, or in light of the lack of support that we've seen in public outreach, should it be something that we cross off the list and focus on other solutions, such as valets and other solutions?
Can I piggyback on that? I just want to say the explanation that you gave about what flexible targeted parking means, it really hadn't been shared in depth with the public. So I think when people saw flexible paid parking, they maybe had a different idea in their head. So it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
That they're reacting to maybe their own ideas of what that is.
Right.
I don't know if it's possible to be a little bit pregnant here. Maybe, but you would have to start with the app. In other words, so the question is, could people in Glencoe, if I go to Evanston, app, if I want to park as a daily person for the train, app. So how hard a lift would it be for us to get our residents to start thinking, okay, we're doing an app, and people learn, and the first, and you want to park the first hour's free, or I don't know if my guess is the technology doesn't, maybe it does to particular spaces. That's maybe, so you pull into a space and okay, the first half hour, if it's a primo space that used to be one of the 15-minute spaces on Park in front of Walgreens. But anyway, so the question is, instead of making it paid, period, maybe it's app and it's free for a period, but then you start to pay. Is that something, would that be more tolerable? Because like I said, my head does not explode having to use an app.
I think that is possible. I think it's a function of the examination of the idea, right? And I think what we've talked about it, we haven't necessarily talked about it as a blanket in the entirety of the business district, but is it park and burn it, right? The most high valued spaces, if you will, from the standpoint of the user base. I will say, I've had conversations with residents in the community who've said this would be a great way to solve our parking problem because this is what other bigger cities do around the country. And I've had the same identical conversation who said, if you want every business that you've got, this is a great way to do it, right? So there's a lot of opinions about what it is. I think the difficult part is kind of taking the step into it. And we certainly, I will say, there are either utilizing, we'd have to explore it, utilizing the services that we already have in place for commuter parking or other alternatives that are out there. This is not an uncommon situation around the country. I've met many a vendor who is providing this kind of paid parking structure option, but I think it's going to be loved and loathed. It's the best and the worst.
What's the revenue split on that?
We use one of the same app we use for the train, Passport. Yeah.
I think for what it's worth, our office is in downtown Evanston, so we see people all the time. And I would say there's a lot of people that use the apps, but also a fair amount are still, paying with credit cards. So
Yeah.
I think you have to always kind of provide that option.
For the old.
Does it work? I mean, it seems to me like there's got to be other communities like ours that have used this and seen that it actually, if, I'm not really interested in people's opinions, I'd like to know if there's data to support that this is an effective way of moving people along.
We don't pay for highway parking, you know, we're not doing that yet. I mean, I think if I'm driving my car, I can drive my car 2 miles farther and not have to worry about it. Not but parking or whatever, just more parking. We're not Evanston, we don't have the same draw that downtown Evanston does, there's all those restaurants there, and all kinds of stuff to do, so. I mean, I would, if you enforce it, I think if we should enforce parking for 2 hours, we have those, the new cool car that reads the plates. I mean, that's.
So the question is, I would not immediately want to start charging, or at least not charging. So if they're in a primo spot and we think it should be a 15-minute spot, maybe it's free for 15 minutes.
Does it work?
Then you start to pay.
Yeah.
It's in the car, is it?
It does, really, but it works depending on what your goals are. And if your goal is, I think that a lot of these new places that have had the flexible dynamic pricing, the goal is typically to reduce circulation for looking for parking and to make it so when people are coming to that district in their car, they can feel confident that there's going to be a spot in the general vicinity. It might be a block or it might be a district, a certain district, but that's dependent on the dynamic pricing to where these places will typically, the price will go up until there's a vacant spot.
The app sets?
The apps, the apps will set it, yes. So
Dynamic pricing.
the dynamic pricing, and then if there's not demand, the price will go down. If you go
But it
down to
won't
zero.
tell you if someone didn't pay and it's been next.
That's correct.
Or someone can show up, oh, I thought there was a spot in here.
So
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
well, actually, I do think there are ways to do that. It's technology driven, right? And we see it, you see it in a number of locations in parking garages generally, where there are indicator lights that are sharing.
I was gonna
We've- I've seen it, I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody who's employed it, but I've seen it in open air environments too, where there is technology that is
in small
tracking.
communities like
Well,
ours.
that's a solid question. I'm not saying I know the exact application, but all I'm saying is I've seen it in use. How well it's worked is not something I think we can necessarily say with certainty tonight, but
I'd be more inclined to see how everything else works first. All our small, our signage improvements or for all that stuff. Maybe add some more parking. Who goes to a salon for 4 hours?
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't.
I think
we
Okay.
can surprise.
All right, well, the people who go,
4
I
hours.
don't think we should design a whole system for the few people that go to a salon every few weeks, who may or may
Oh, no,
not
it's
even
every
live
12
here. Yeah, but you see, I do think I do think an app is kind of a deterrent for people from the outside, myself.
I don't, but I'm concerned about it. I want to educate the outside
Yeah.
people that we want here shopping and dining and going.
They might wanna go, I'll just rather keep driving and I don't wanna deal with it, you know, I think a lot of the people coming in and out of downtown are, people like me, and, you know, who are in and out fast, with quick drop-offs, pickups, your kid, this, all these. We don't have time to, there's no time to sit there, I think, and, fiddle with an app, in my opinion. My other opinion is, my take is, I'd be willing to maybe look at an app, if the app maybe had some AI on it and actually told you where the open spots were with maybe cameras versus someone having to plug in and pay. Maybe there's some technology there that says, all right, this area is red. Oh, I have my app. I can go to parking lot blue or instead because it's less busy. I think. an
That
app
is
would
not
be there. But I
atypical,
think-
that is not atypical technology
Yeah,
anymore.
or maybe,
And it's fairly mainstreamed.
yeah,
I would say,
like real live information.
right,
Instead of driving around, you have sustainability improvements, things like that. I think we should just try everything else before we do this targeted flexible paid parking. We could just table. It's my recommendation, but of course
We give out a lot of parking tickets.
chief.
It's a no, and I'd say no in that we are always attempting to gain compliance. So the ticket is the last thing we try to do. Quite frankly, and a lot of times we're catching somebody who's parking illegally in the downtown area. And if the CSOs can make contact with them, we advise try to get them to, follow the law accordingly. And then we issue the citation for it. Now, if that vehicle is caught, as the village manager mentioned, if the vehicle is caught on the automated license plate readers, then that's a different story. We're gonna issue the citation.
Yeah, so you get those car drivers around, and sometimes my car's parked for 1 or 2 hours, I'm gonna get like a ticket in the mail or whatever.
You'll get a citation next year in the vehicle.
Okay, I should put it,
Yeah, it takes a picture of the vehicle, it compares the vehicle to the last time the car was passed, time stamped, to verify the license plate is the same license plate and the vehicle hasn't just been moved. Because you do have some people, so they do a side-by-side comparison and not just trusting the AI, so there's a verification and they issue a citation and then actually put that in the citation.
we give a lot of tickets out.
That's fair, I'll say, in that regard, yes. Fair.
That's what I need, but okay, fair enough.
We can get you numbers on that. I mean, I think some of it, to the chief's point, there's the village president frequently refers to the public safety department as your friend. There is a methodology of being mindful that it isn't just about issuing a ticket, it's about compliance, as the chief mentioned. So I think part of it has been our historical approach to trying to say to them, we don't want to give you a ticket, so you shouldn't park here. But there are circumstances in there. It's automated. It's much easier than it used to be from the standpoint of how tickets are issued. But it has not been I wouldn't say we're blanketing the central business district or the commuter lots are a little different with tickets all the time. But certainly if somebody's parked in a space for 2 hours and 5 minutes versus 2 hours and 45 minutes, there's a little bit of a difference in grace.
Okay, can we tell whether somebody is a recidivist?
Yeah.
In other words.
License plate.
So, we could, and probably should, okay,
And we do.
you get a pass, you get a pass.
Yeah.
And maybe the ticket says, you get it, the ticket says, we gave you a pass the first 3 times. Now no more.
Some tickets, some cities have like a $5 parking ticket, I think it's like.
Well,
It's
ours
50.
now,
It's 50.
I'm saying they have like these small.
We have an
small
escalator,
fees.
like.
Yes, it is an
Well-
escalator. So after a certain number of them, they get more expensive.
Yes.
And we have people who rack up.
Big bill.
Sometimes, yes, sometimes we can't find them, but yeah.
And that was part of also the consideration for a $25 parking fine is in the mind of many repeat offenders, just the cost of paying for a spot. So that's why we found that was the issue of compliance. I mean, we do issue citations, but that's never the end goal is to hand people a citation. That's a bad path to go down. We want to always gain compliance, so we want to make sure that the traffic flows. The number one concern, the number one thing that really inhibits our traffic are people that are making left-hand turns. In the uptown area, if you were across the double yellow, that's the number one thing that causes the problem, and it causes the sweeping delay there. So those are individuals that we attempt to educate, but are often finding ourselves, again, if they're repeat offenders, we're finding ourselves issuing citations.
So just to go back to the paid parking, so we can give direction to Jody as she drafts the final draft. Is this something that should remain under
consent.
consideration?
I don't want to pay, but I'm more, personally, I would be okay with sort of moving us towards an app, but that is not the consensus. So the answer is, at this point, we're not doing that, and let's just see how we do with the other stuff. And we can consider, moving towards an app later. I read the room.
Thank you. Ballet, this is related. This would really be an effort. There might be some village costs associated with this. There would certainly be a need to study the logistics of it, places where it might work. Is this something that we should continue to explore? The intent of this would not be kind of the opposite of paid parking. Paid parking would be to clear up space in the core downtown. This would be to utilize the spaces that are significantly further from the core downtown. Is this something that the final draft plan should include all the continue to explore valet parking, or is this not something that will feel?
So-
And just to give a little more context around valet parking, we're not necessarily suggesting that this is a round the clock application, but this would be something that would be for any and all participants in any of our businesses in the district, probably at targeted times of the week. So what we know is we do not have a significant parking problem in the dinner hour. Even if Writers Theater has a full show, you could still find parking, go to Guildhall, go to any of the restaurants. It's relatively easy. Where we have an issue is that midday, Wednesday through Saturday, timeline. So let's say 10 to 2, where parking, particularly in the summer, is at a premium. Now, what we've talked about are ways to help people feel more comfortable walking across Green Bay, getting to some of the commuter lots. I will tell you, what we're also seeing is that commuters are coming back to the commuter lots. And so our lots are more full, particularly Tuesday through Thursday, than they had been, let's say, in 2021 or 2022 as we were emerging from the pandemic. And so people are populating the commuter lots differently, which there are still available spaces, but they happen to be all the way down Old Green Bay Road. So why we bring this has been something that's been suggested by some of our businesses over the years. There are communities in our area that are doing valet services as a function of providing additional options because they can't create parking where it doesn't exist. The cost to do so depends on a number of factors, any number of factors. We're just looking at it from the standpoint of it may be a viable alternative for us to continue to consider in a targeted time frame in this area.
So a couple of years ago, one of the salons put their arm on us and said, "Look here, 4 hours. They're old ladies and they need a valet." That was the pitch, and they wanted us to pay for it. We didn't do it at the time, so are we talking about accommodating the 4-hour parkers, or is it more general because of the 10 to 2 on Tuesday to Thursday? It's a zoo up there.
It's more the latter than the former. I would say some of the same people are the same people, though. So when we're not talking about it just from the standpoint of only for salon customers, right? This would be if you're going to go to hometown and you don't want to try to figure out where you want to park, you stop at the valet stand, you drop your car. It doesn't have to be free. There's nothing saying that it does. But we're really just interested in whether the concept is worth continuing to pursue to gather the information.
So I guess I would say yes. And maybe it's Tuesday through Saturday at lunchtime, in and around lunchtime, because that's when it's most difficult. And it doesn't necessarily have to be free. And maybe the price could depend on, whether you're a 2-hour going to lunch or 4-hour going to the salon, because you've got to pay maybe more if you're going to the salon. But yeah, in my view, and again, we should talk about it, is okay, let's think about it.
I can share that Mount Prospect launched a valet program, and their peak hour that they're doing this for, it's like Thursdays through Saturdays for the evening dining rush to support their al fresco dining. And as far as the first test, it's gone well. But it's about finding that sweet spot as to when you want to provide it.
Glenview is also doing.
Mm-hmm.
The
village of Glenview?
Yes.
Or,
No, it's the village of Glenview.
okay.
I love the idea of valet parking. The practical concern is trying to figure out is, okay, now you're going to encourage people. You think left turners in the parking spaces clog up the traffic? I got 4 people coming all at once. It's right before lunch. They all want to drop off and take the valet. Exactly where are we doing this? we could have 4 cars sitting, so how many parking spaces do we lose, or what other machinations are we doing physically so it's convenient?
If
And you're not losing more spaces than you're gaining, and you can accommodate the lot.
we would absolutely have to work through some of that logistic issue. And I think that was one of the concerns we had a few years ago when we talked about it. I don't think it's completely insurmountable, but it is not nothing. And I think that's a piece of the consideration for sure.
But if we could do it, if we could figure it out, make some changes to the sidewalks and figure out places to put the cars, I think valet would be a huge help, because people, especially people that'll tolerate a $25 ticket, will absolutely, sure, because then there'll be an app for that. And before you leave, you'll be texting the valet, and the car, presumably, if they're staffed properly, will be there when you get there. And they can charge for that.
And I think an app for that would be perfect.
Yeah.
I think an app, great idea. Yes to the app. I love the idea of the peak timing. But, we may at some point when our businesses, the restaurants start growing, we might want to expand that for the night hours too. I could just see people who don't want to get off, be using valet. I think that's a great idea.
How's non-prospects valet work?
It's subsidized by the village, so people don't pay for it.
And what is it? So I know like Naperville, but Naperville is a booming downtown. They have the little electric things all over so that people don't drink and drive, which I think used to be a problem, but they put it in. But they're open like golf cart kind of things, but you're talking like a physical car. No, we're actually talking about a valet stand where you drop your vehicle and a person takes it away and parks it in a remote location. The way Glenview does it, they have it in 2 locations, So they've got it 2 valet stands in the Glen and 2 valet stands in their downtown. And you drop your vehicle, it picks it up, and you walk into wherever you're going. It's no different than anything that you've seen at, there are specific restaurants in Highland Park and Highwood that do it themselves. Yeah, it's the same concept.
I think Evanston, restaurants in Evanston have too.
Doesn't the problem right now.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, that's theirs.
It is
It
there.
is their own, yeah, and in many cases, the restaurants frequently do it as a service to their guests. This is the way we're looking at it is perhaps less specific to a particular business patron, more to
Everyone.
people who are coming to the central business district to hopefully go to 2 or 3 places at the same time. But we can look into that more if there isn't
Yeah.
significant opposition to it.
That's, I think, to consider that.
You're not gonna use the right-
Yes.
All
All right, so the next near-term enhancement I'm going to talk about is additional parking supply. Jody went over the map and I have it up here again. Areas where we could look at adding parking spaces throughout the area. I want to highlight a couple and just talk through some concerns or benefits. So the area by Friends Park, the studies identified 15 parking spaces that we could add here as diagonal parking. We could also look at this area as adding about 8 to 10 parallel spots. It would have a less of impact to Friends Park, but it could be kind of a balance. It is directly across from residents. They may not like that there are, parking spots right in front of their house now. But that's kind of a consideration as far as diagonal and the volume of parking spaces that would be in front of the house versus parallel, which is kind of something they're more used to seeing. But it would create that dedicated parking spots to
The
them.
numbers again, sorry, you said 8 to.
8 to 10 parallel
Okay.
and 15.
And we should also mention that there would be tree impacts.
Yes.
Garbage or trees in the area.
I would also say that what Monica just said in terms of parallel versus angle is true in any of the locations we're going to talk about. That we could, in a means of perhaps softening the impact, the overall impact, with the requisite number of reduction. But just to circle back, this is kind of what Jody said before. Looking at available physical spaces that the village controls, owns, and has at its disposal was kind of the model that we looked at. We don't have to acquire anything. We don't have to reconsider how it would function because these are wide rights of way that exist already. And in that particular location, the park district, there've been encroachments of Four Friends Park into the village's right of way. We have an exceedingly wide right of way on Vernon Avenue. There's historical reasons for that, but we don't use most of it. In some cases, there are double rows of parkway trees because the right of way is so wide. We're not talking about taking it all the way, but basically stopping at the extent of Friends Park. It's whatever that physical distance is, probably 200 feet.
150.
Yeah. Right, has 15 spaces. So just something to be mindful of in that location.
You may be able to save the future.
If you do parallel
Parallel.
versus
Yeah.
perpendicular,
Yeah,
correct?
and that's all considerations as well. So the next two spots I want to talk about are extensions westward, Park Avenue from Vernon to Greenwood, and also Hazel from Vernon to Greenwood. There's additional right of way in which we could add angled spots. The impact here is, we may have to do some utility coordination. There are parkway trees that need to be removed. So we're looking at potential of, I think, about 15 spots.
In this location, it's 17.
17, okay, 17 along Park Avenue. That could be adjusted. We may want to create a bump out around one of the more mature parkway trees and reduce that overall number. But there's an opportunity to add spaces within this section. I will just say as a price point, I think from an experience on another project, we're seeing potentially about like 6,000 to 10,000 per parking spot as a cost to build these out. Really depends on what the existing conditions are that we're dealing with though. So a utility conflict, a pole relocation may impact that more significantly, but that's just a broad range. Both of these on Park Avenue and Hazel, they are adjacent to residential property. So you are placing parking on somebody's side property line. And so I think there is a consideration for that as well. That's just not, we're kind of encroaching into that residential neighborhood feel of area.
That being said, don't forget all of this area that surrounds Central School, including these parallel spaces on Park Avenue, are business district parking spaces. These particularly are solely for the purpose of business employees. So there's a lot of parking on Park Avenue in this residential area. They just don't exist in this short window from the end of the business district to Greenwood.
Look at making them parallel and more lights kind of flashing in, or look at some screening also to kind of add buffer.
Yep.
Not
I think there's also a question of whether we would extend the streetscape sidewalk further to the end along with those parking spaces if we did it.
Just for what it's worth, I'm okay with angle parking. This is part of the Uptown Business District. And I understand that nobody wants anything in front of their house, but this is our Uptown Business District. And obviously we'll listen. We do, and I get, with angle parking, in theory, the headlights could be shining on your house. But most of this is a little more remote, so it's less likely to be at night. And we've been hearing about parking for 50 years. And if there is low hanging fruit,
100%.
I'm in favor of doing it.
A couple other I want to touch on. So it sounds like there's general support for the area in front of Friends and then Park and Hazel. We could look at Village Court. There's an entrance to Village Court off of Vernon Avenue, closing that off, changing the circulation of Village Court and adding a couple spots there. If that's something that
we felt like.
Yeah, I think
It's like
before
with
we
the
would,
libraries.
before we would do that, that's probably something we would test drive a little bit. So probably we'd block off this exit entrance for some window of time to just kind of see how it works.
It would change circulation.
Would change
That's
circulation.
my
Would you-
rotation back.
Now, would you also get more spaces internally in the parking lot?
Potentially, yeah, because you could
Yeah,
do
you don't
some
need
here.
that. Right, so you get spaces on the street and inside.
Yeah.
I mean, for what it's worth, there's no parking.
This is granular.
There's no parking here. We've got utilities here.
Yeah,
But if we wanted to restripe and lose a couple of spaces there to try and gain some here, yeah, you probably could be efficient.
So that, just, so we can't even think about doing this until the library thing is resolved. We don't know what that's gonna look like. And I have to say, it's light, but it's kind of like one way. It's the one way thing, but it's one way light, so it wouldn't be as disruptive. But I think it would be kind of disruptive, and I don't know what it would do to Village Court, which people don't really drive on Village Court, but all of a sudden they would have to. And,
It would change circulation.
and so
Yeah.
I'm not, I
Right.
mean, it gives me personally the creeps.
Yeah.
Me too.
yeah, well, and that's, I mean, I think in a perfect world, we'd have another north-south street. We don't. We have what we have. We have pretty much Vernon Avenue. Greenwood really doesn't count. And Village Court is a glorified improved alley. That's what it was when it was originally platted. And so the struggle we have is physical infrastructure. We know that, and that's one of the reasons why one way on Vernon is a complex concept. It could work very well, but we know it would overwhelm Village Court. So that's a piece of this but we wanted to ask the question. This could very well be backburnered to a future conversation about streetscape improvements that would be tied to further development or something like that, that could alter the entire, this entire streetscape element over here.
Yes, I vote for backburn.
Okay. And then, I mean, I think that.
We should hear from everybody, but I just,
There's consensus-y.
Yeah, and I think the last two I was gonna touch on are also, I mean, I started on these in order for a reason. So it's the additional parking in front of Public Works Garage. It's converting those from parallel into diagonal. I think just given the fact that we started the Public Works or the space needs analysis of relocating the Public Works Garage, it doesn't feel like a good investment, given that there's potential change. The last one on Park Avenue, in front of right at the intersection there is some like sidewalk space that could be converted into additional parking, but it's just, do we enjoy having that refuge there? Is that a space that's treasured? Or is it?
Don't know that it's treasured space, but I have a feeling that someone will take it. And it will be.
Okay. I mean, there's 3 pear trees and I think 3 benches, and then also the drive-through, so there's visibility things to think about.
If that space ever turns off, it becomes
Okay.
Be
really
a diff-
area.
yes, it would.
Drive through
It's a good
and
point.
into that. Really sweet.
Okay, so not take that
Not
away
yet,
from
yeah.
future possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I did have another idea as I was driving around, in front of our village parking lot on the west side, that northwest corner, down. Not
Village Court.
I'm sorry, commuter, I can't see.
So
We're all the way down on the south end.
Temple Court?
Yeah, Temple Court, I'm sorry.
Yep. Uh-huh.
On the northwest corner of northwest,
West.
a great area. I think there might be room there to squeeze in more parking.
On Vernon.
On Vernon here? Yeah, there could be.
I think it looks like it's our property.
It is.
In our little envelope. There
Mhm.
might be a house,
Yeah, there's a house here,
but I mean,
but
there might be
this,
space.
It's not cherished sidewalk space, right?
now I will say,
It's just,
if we look at a future redevelopment of the Public Works Garage, it likely would include the Temple Court lot as a function of that redevelopment. So that may be an area that we explore, but maybe it's something that we explore to see how what we could fit there, if it's relatively inexpensive. I don't know what the timeline is ultimately going to be with a redevelopment, but we could look at that.
It's like
Yeah.
a lot of conflicts, utilities or trees, and it looks like there's some, we can squeeze if it's 6 to 10 per spot if we're building more.
Yep.
Maybe if they're not as expensive per spot.
Yeah.
We can look at that for sure.
An additional parking supply. The last near-term enhancement, there's not a lot of discussion on this. I think we're just looking at, really updating our policy to provide more uniformity, maybe, decrease any crowding on the sidewalks. So this is something we do want to move forward with it. I think this can opens a conversation and segues into our next discussion, which is going to be the outdoor dining policy and how we might want to update that hand in hand with the outdoor dining policy. So we're going to save this or kind of table this for the next discussion. So I'm going to move on to long-term infrastructure enhancements. And this is looking at the options for Vernon Avenue. Taylor, I'll let you take the lead right now.
So as Jody was discussing, Tesca did create 3 different options for Vernon Avenue between parking and Hazel, the mid, and max. And these are all different attempts to try to balance on-street parking availability with improved opportunities for outdoor dining and pedestrian experience. And they all kind of come at it from a different way. The min and the mid lose on-street parking to different degrees. The max does not lose on-street parking. So what we're asking tonight is not for you to choose one of these. I think there's an acknowledgement that none of these are imminent. None of these are 2027 projects. They're all going to be expensive. One thing that we do want to talk about is the max, because the max was designed to kind of give us the best of both worlds, where you don't lose any on-street parking at all, and you get a significant increase in outdoor dining space. However, the max converts this block to one-way traffic. Previous discussions with the village board, there was, I would say, mixed feedback, probably definitely leaning towards negative opinion of the max. We talked about this twice with the planning commission, and the planning commission was not in favor of it whatsoever. The planning commission was against this concept completely.
But then you got new data, which was the survey,
That's right.
which showed that response survey, not positive, they were sort of for it.
This was the most positive out of the 3, but I would say it was 44%. So 56% voted against it.
500.
So here's the problem.
That's overwhelming.
Here's the problem. We are a one street town. And because what would people do? Where would they go? It strikes me as almost certainly bedlam.
Retail just becomes Winnetka problem.
So
Just keep going.
the way that I come up with this is the max at the very least would require an in-depth traffic study. It likely makes more sense to do that study once we have a better idea of, this is from the recent comprehensive plan, which calls for is as the 2016 plan for downtown was the tune-up, calls for potentially extending Village Court down to Temple. That's all. We don't know if this will happen or not. Doing a spacings analysis to start the process of exploring potential future uses for public works garage, this whole area, and the 8912 area. The question that we have tonight is, in light of potential future changes to this part of the central business district, and in light of the fact that the max concept was the most popular with the respondents to the public survey, is this something that, as we develop the final version of this plan, should still be on the table, or should we stop spending time considering this? Keep in mind that there might be future changes to Village Court, which could potentially make it more of a street and less of an alley. We don't know that.
So why don't you think about it? If, what we're talking about is if the public works garage isn't the public works garage, if it becomes either repurposing it or rebuilding something else, okay, then I would, and we actually have 2 or 3 streets. We could resurrect the idea, but I just don't see it flying. There's a lot of stuff you guys need to think about. There's a lot of places we spend money. My view is this isn't one of them. Now it's, we are receptive to the public's views, but I don't think it'll pan out. I mean, it seems cool until you think, okay, you've now driven south past Park. You're at Hazel. Now what? I mean, you have to go to Sheridan Road.
Well, and
it's just a nightmare. But you go to Greenwood and it's one way during the school day.
Right.
It's just way too complicated.
These were reasons why, the concept of even shutting down streets for outdoor dining, like some other communities do, is really an impossibility for us. We just don't have enough through streets to support that kind of change. And I think what we've talked about is that there is value to perhaps a series of the elements that are considered as part of these from the standpoint of streetscape enhancements, bump outs and things like that, that if we look at, and there are several sites that are considered for redevelopment in the comprehensive plan. If any of those materialize, it's not just public works. If any of those materialize, it may be worth at that time having another conversation and having something in a plan that says, look, we are curious about ways to enhance the streetscape. Now is the time to do it because we're going to have new spaces. And the chance to do that ties to the redevelopment effort as opposed to build it and hope the redevelopment effort comes. And so, I think that's why we kind of classify this as a longer term opportunity. I don't know that we necessarily have to say all of those 3, none of those 3, but certainly including aspects of them in the final plan that we're going to bring back to you guys in a few months, so that we have something to reference as well if that redevelopment opportunity presents itself.
You have Greenwood. I mean, think about Greenwood at what, 3:00 in the afternoon of a school day with what's going on. And the cars on Hazel and Greenwood.
Yeah.
And then Vernon's one way. Even if you made Temple much nicer, would you have to make that one way the other way to be able to, move traffic?
Probably. Yeah, you'd have a big
Yeah, it's probably how you'd have to
Take
do
everybody
it.
by Gary's house. They could drive by.
You tour all the neighborhoods.
I think you'd be better.
At this point, that dog won't.
Yeah, you'd be better
To be
off.
determined.
We'd have less people with nooses coming for us if we just put in a multi-deck garage where the parking lot is now.
If I may, another way to think about it is, yes, 44% voted for Max, but I think, a very close second of 37% voted for Min, and then 20 or something for Min. The goal of this exercise was to solve for wider sidewalks, is what people were asking for. How do we get wider sidewalks? And if we are willing to part with some parking, get wider sidewalks, but then gain back that parking by the on-street parking that we're talking about adding. That's another way to think about it. And I think all of these things kind of all work together.
It seems to me that probably there's enough direction on all this for now. So should we declare victory and turn? Doesn't mean we win, but we're declaring victory. And should we turn to a little discussion about outdoor dining?
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
And I would say, don't think that we can't reapproach some of these concepts as we're talking about this next subject. And because there's a lot of overlap with it. I'll let Adam run with the presentation, but this is just as a reminder, comes out of the conversation around the removal of streetery several months back and the idea of how we do outdoor dining. And so Adam's got some information to share with you on that.
Thank you, Ms. Rancher. As Village Venture Probably mentioned, it is an outgrowth of our September 18th regular meeting discussion regarding our outdoor dining structure. The village has two programs in place. One is an outdoor seating program. This is a long-standing outdoor cafe style program that we've had within the village, which was expanded in 2014 to include the B2 zoning district. During COVID-19, we began an outdoor dining structure program. This is the use of on-street or curbside area. It's confined to the B1 zoning district only, and it's upon agreement approved by the village board. And currently, we charge a rate of 50 cents per square foot. As part of the discussion in September, the village board had mentioned some curiosity about what other communities are doing in relation to outdoor dining. There's a survey located in attachment A that encompasses several area communities that are adjacent to us. But in general, a review of the data shows that nearly all municipalities permit some form of outdoor dining. That's, to be clear, that's outdoor cafe style seating. Fewer extend the allowance to curbside or street dining, which is similar to our outdoor dining structure. There's varying levels of fees. The village of Glencoe does not charge a fee for the outdoor cafe style seating program, but does charge a fee for the outdoor dining structure program. And nearly none of them accommodate a year-round program. So typically it's confined to a seasonality of either April to November or May to October or something like that. So really the purpose of presenting this material to you tonight is to discuss the outdoor dining programs in the village and determine whether or not we'd like to continue looking at this program and whether or not we should evaluate adjustments to our current programs that we're currently offering. I think we need to, as we discussed earlier, we need to talk about the unique limitations of curbside or on-street dining in Glencoe. In particular, appearance, safety, location, and spacing standards in relation to our current downtown materials that we have out there, as well as our ability to accommodate equally for all restaurants in the downtown. We talk about Vernon a lot, but there is a restaurant coming in on Park Avenue, some other locations as well too, where we need to discuss whether or not outdoor dining can be accommodated in those spaces. So that's kind of the purpose behind the informational presentation tonight. I just wanted to provide an opportunity for the board to kind of discuss the outdoor dining structure program as well as the cafe style seating program.
One point to add to Adam's comments as it relates to the cafe style seating, which is what we call sidewalk dining. We kind of glossed over it somewhat in the previous presentation, but one of the aspects that we want to look at are standards for what can be on our public sidewalks. It has been a somewhat deregulated process over the years. And so what you now see are a hodgepodge of planters, of benches, sometimes of small tables that aren't tied to a restaurant. And even while they have to supply us with their specs, a lot of disuniformity with materials and types of tables and such. So that's something that we want to look at to help to unify the look and feel of our sidewalks and hopefully declutter them a bit, because there certainly are areas where it is less comfortable to walk, or if somebody is in a wheelchair or something like that, there are some real significant issues trying to navigate that. So I just add that as a component of one of the things that we're already going to look at with respect to that project.
That's kind of a unified design.
Seeking to at least limit some of the spectrum that we have, because it's certainly across the whole spectrum. There are certain standards already. You can't have wooden tables and chairs, for instance, for outdoor dining. But there aren't really many standards relative to the color, things like that. So while most of them tend to be black or charcoal, not all of them. And so you may remember when Honey Butter Fried Chicken was in town, they had yellow and white. And they were kind of fun, but they were very different. And so I think that's a big aspect of if we're looking at making modifications to the cafe dining, it's really along those lines, as opposed to limiting it further. I think it's something that the community really likes. It's great in the summertime to see the vibrancy of outdoor dining. So that's something we certainly are focused on.
Amazing. So nobody said anything tonight, but everybody on the board is in favor of the concept of outdoor dining. They've already said that. We don't want to, and I think we all agree, we do not want to, we want to be friendly to people that want to do it. We don't want to torture our restaurants in being able to do it. But we're sort of at we're at an inflection point. We have on Park, we have a new restaurant that doesn't exist yet, so we don't know what they have in mind. We have not heard from Guildhall on what Plan B is because they don't have the streetery, and we have a brand new restaurant, across the street at Elion. The Chinese place has not done outdoor dining. They have maybe the chicken place that they may have a little bit.
They do, yeah. Sidewalk.
So, but we sort of need to hear from our vendors as to what they have in mind. And then we absolutely, from my point of view, could think about, is there some standardization want to affect the appearance? But I sort of want to hear what do they have in mind?
Well, I guess one of the things we're wanting to proffer up to you really is it a program that you want us to even provide? Part of the entirety of this conversation has been focused on parking and the availability or lack thereof. And all of the things that we talked about tonight won't be in place for a while, right? We have to do engineering, we have to work through that, we're going to plan out construction. Even if we're able to make those improvements to make the crosswalk at Park and Green Bay happen next year, it's still going to be probably at the end of next year. So we're talking about, we've got a couple of seasons at least before we start to really see any major modifications. And the question comes down to whether it's worth us, and we can certainly reach out to the restaurants and say, hey, is this something you even want to do? If you would do it, these are the things that you have to be focused on. One of the struggles and difficulties we have is that our geometry is complicated. And when you think about parklets, the visual that Jody used before works really well in parallel parking spaces. It's a very neat and tidy rectangle. It's right outside of the restaurant. You can place your tables very effectively. There are actually kits you can buy that slot right into that very neat space. We have 38-degree angled parking spaces that mean you can't easily do a rectangle without taking up at least 2 parking spaces. In some cases, you might take up 3 parking spaces for the same amount of space generally that you might take up if it was a single parallel space. And so that's one of the challenges, just the physical challenges that we have in this business district that other communities might not have. That we also don't have the ability. We looked into communities like Hinsdale. They shut down an entire street. Arlington Heights shuts down an entire street. And those spaces then are very comfortable, right? You don't worry about security because there's nobody driving past you. You can create pedestrian walkways in between. We know we can't close any streets. That won't work for us. And so there are significant limitations that come into play when we're trying to make something like this work well in this physical space. And so I think that as we've talked about it, that's been kind of one of the things that we trip on a little bit. That doesn't make it impossible though. And I think there are ways that we could look at it. Certainly, one of the criticisms of the streetery was that it had a footprint that required a lot of overlap. Part of the reason is because of the way our parking spaces lay out. And so the last parking space of the 4 that were taken up, it wasn't even fully covering that parking space, but in order to make it functionally work, it took up an extra spot. And so this is a little bit less than that. I would not expect that we would be talking about space that's quite that large, but Valor did this, the restaurant two before Allianz. They did it in 2021 and 2022. That's a unique spot too, because we have a crosswalk, kind of a depressed curve over there, which made it a little bit easier actually for that particular location. But they took up 2.5 parking spaces with that setup to create a neat rectangle. So the real question is, if somebody's interested in it, we certainly can have that conversation. But I guess the question is, do you want us to market it? Do you want us to go out and say, hey, do you want to do this? If so, what would you want to do? I would also say there's certainly going to be some investment, I think, that the village would have to make in a program like this to make it look the way that the village would want it to look, because I think that's an important component of it as well.
I don't think we have anything marked yet.
I don't think we should market it. I'd be curious to see if they're going to say, like, what are visions do they have? Like, what is Glencoe even thinking? I mean, we've done our research, but they're very creative. They came up with beautiful street arrays concept from another state. But they, I'm sure, have maybe a vision of what they are thinking about maybe these streetlets or whatnot. I don't know. But we'll let them come to us and maybe ask us about it. But I am interested in yes, I love outdoor seating. I think we should encourage as much outdoor seating as possible. I like the idea of some of the uniformity, but I do think we should give them the creative freedom to kind of express themselves a little bit in front of their storefront. So I would be okay with, I don't think we have to have all the colors match, but if their design passed our plan commission and their canopies passed, I think that same color scheme I think would be okay. I am though very cautious. Would like to also protect the open space and ensure that they do meet our ADA compliance requirements for width and all that and safety. An idea there is when I was at the city, a requirement is they would come in with their design of their borders were required at least 50% of the surrounding space had to be covered with border, and there was landscaping required. It was part of it. But that border not only provided like a nice little room, we talked about rooms, like room for the cafe people to be sitting and felt also privacy, but also prohibited the space from kind of approaching and people kind of doing a little bit of this, your bag, the water, look all the space we take. So it helped kind of prevent that growth unnecessarily or pulling up chairs and hey, come on. So that was part of that program. We could consider that if we have space. They don't have to be wide, big, fancy, but maybe again, go downtown, every business, everything is so different. Everyone's different. People really get creative with boundaries. So we can think about that if that's something the rest of the board would like to think about. If you want to look into it, get back to us. I'd be willing to explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, I think that would be part of what we look at for some of the standard build out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Standard build out of what?
Yeah. The standard build out of standards.
Oh, build out of
sorry,
not building.
build out of
Yes.
standards for
Some
outdoor.
standard recommendations, like people pretty. So for decluttering planters and whatnot, we can add a little bit extra, as far as those cafes, I think really nice.
I think that's thoughtful, and I think that's consistent with sort of what the program that we already allow, which is sidewalk dining. And I think we're all in favor of that. And I think George had a lot of good ideas there. Let me throw out one other thing that we should consider, particularly if no one's come to us and said, okay, here's my plan for something temporary on the street. I do want, if somebody has a plan, I want to hear about it, but I don't think we have anything to market yet. But so if they can handle it, I remember there was a time when Guildhall's sidewalk dining went past their storefront and it went, further. Okay, in other words, I think.
And the policy accommodates that today. We can accommodate that
We
today.
should, we obviously need to think about not over cluttering, and we have to think about what the neighbors might think, although the bank shouldn't care. So we should do that. So let's, my view is we want outdoor dining. We're going to be receptive to what our restaurants want. I think, we have one restaurant doesn't exist, but it will soon. One of them is new. I don't know if, it's winter. I don't know if they've had a chance to even get their breath to think about it. And then, one is an established restaurant, but they're going to have to come up with a new concept. Let's hear what they have to say. And I'm really reluctant to doing anything substantial on, say, Vernon Avenue. You do something and then the restaurant moves and it goes, and then there's one next door. Then what do we do? So I would focus on the existing program, and looking at what George was talking about.
You mentioned like timeline, like seasonal. I'm open to the idea of even expanding that. Say it used to be April to October. There was
Ours is
March.
April 1 to November
It
30.
was one really warm March and St. Patrick's Day. Everybody so then we extended it to March 1st. I'm not saying we're having St. Patrick's Day parties on the street, but like we can extend that to be an extra month on both ends or longer. I would be okay with it. We have warm weather all the time. All the time now. It's not, we don't have a spring and a summer. We kind of have fluctuations all year, so that could be interesting.
You guys have enough guidance?
I'd like to take a step back as to why we would be interested in perhaps identifying some street conversion for restaurants. And to me, there are three reasons to do it. Restaurants are really special, very special. They're not like a regular retail establishment. They build community. People go there, they see each other there. It's part of the building of the fabric of the community. And whatever we can do to reinforce that, I think is really important. Second thing is there's a lot of sales tax involved in that. What's in it for us? Well, there's money in it for us, but it's also money in it for the successful business for that. And we would like to have our businesses be successful, and that can contribute to that success. So that's the big picture of things of why to do that. But we may get some pushback from some of the retailers who, hey, you're taking the parking from my store. And the reality is, we're looking at many orders of magnitude more in sales than any any small business. And you get the extra benefit of the community building. I've been doing a lot of research recently on Seaside, Florida, to plan the community, and very, very successful. And it just reinforces, it's like, how do you provide the physical elements that help to build community? And this is one of the big things to try to do. I'll get off my soapbox.
I appreciate all those points. I think everything. So the board was less crazy about a permanent structure 12 months a year in the street. I think everybody, and I look at this chart that I put together, everybody's really okay with seasonal dining. And I think all of us would entertain maybe even seasonal dining in the street. We have to look at it specifically, but we don't, but I want to hear from restaurants about what they have in mind and we'd have to think about it carefully. Taking away parking spaces in the summer is less of a problem than taking away parking spaces in the winter, because people can walk a little bit further in the summer than in the winter. But like I said, it's just premature. We can't close the streets. I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, we could have, if we just closed parking for a minute, we'd have plenty of room, but we can. So I think, yeah, I think maybe, do you have enough guidance as to what we're thinking about, which is we encourage and we'll do our best to facilitate outdoor dining. And we like to hear from our restaurants as to what they have in mind, so we can start thinking about if anybody actually has a plan for some kind of temporary street thing.
Do you have any thoughts relative to fees?
So,
And I'm not talking about sidewalk.
right, no, I got this. I got that. I had a thought when it was a permanent building in the street, which was, gee, this is, why is it different than the rent they're paying? At this point, I don't. Which is not to say there shouldn't be fees, because, but I want to see if we see what the proposals are, then we can start thinking about what we're going to accommodate. And there probably should be some fee, but we don't want to discourage them from being able to do it. It needs to be a viable enterprise. But I think it's premature. There needs to be some fee. There was a fee before, which was tiny. But
it wasn't, if you compare it to what everybody else.
well, they didn't have a building in the street.
I'm just saying, it may not be a tiny fee in a seasonal environment.
Right. And in that respect, it's whatever it is, it's not going to be more than our neighbors. Because we're not doing, Glencoe is not, we don't charge our business sector. You guys think you have enough guidance? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we have 7 minutes. Get our keisters upstairs.
You're gonna have to show you a couple things when upstairs. So how to use the microphones.
Okay, so we have 4 minutes. So we need, is there any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So much.
All in favor?
Hi.
Return, be upstairs.
Thank you. Your seats are the same, you're in the same order as normally. Again, we are down.